Hey everyone, here's another video about the great drummer Morey Feld. And in this one I want to talk about some of the ideas that he would use in his solos. And I also wanted to recommend some more of his recordings because he recorded with a ton of different people over the years. In addition to the ones I mentioned in the other video with Benny Goodman, there's some great stuff with Bud Freeman from 1940, Copenhagen and Sensation. All that stuff is great. And some stuff, live Dr. Jazz broadcasts from the 50s, some with Bobby Hackett, some with Pee Wee Irwin. All that is fantastic. He made a ton of recordings. These are just my favorites. And in addition to the one I had mentioned before, that Benny Goodman live at Basin Street East, my other personal, just absolute favorite recordings of Morey Feld, and the ones I've listened to the most and that have had the biggest impact, are a series of live recordings that he made in the mid-1960s with a band called the Nine Greats of Jazz. And this was a group led by Yank Lawson and Bob Haggart. And the two of them led bands together over the years under many different names. Sometimes they were the Lawson-Haggart Jazz Band. Sometimes they went by the World's Greatest Jazz Band. But here they're called the Nine Greats of Jazz. And it's an incredible band with Billy Butterfield and Lou McGarity, Cuddy Cutshall, Bud Freeman, Peanuts Hucko, Ralph Sutton, Clancy Hayes is on a few tunes. It's an incredible powerhouse band with a six-horn front line, and Morey Feld is just driving the whole thing. He's on fire. It's just a great showcase for him. And the wonderful drummer Jay Duke was the one who many years ago told me about those recordings. I think Jay is actually on the soundtrack for the Woody Allen movie Sleeper, but he was a wonderful drummer and a great guy. And I remember telling him after I heard that Benny Goodman recording with Morey Feld, I said, "Oh, I just heard Morey Feld, he's great." And Jay said, "Oh, well, if you like Morey Feld, you should hear the Nine Greats of Jazz. He's really good on there." They were hard to find, but when I eventually got them, it's just incredible stuff. And one of my favorite tunes that they play is At the Jazz Band Ball, and Morey Feld plays an 8-bar intro on there that I always really liked. He splits it up really nicely. He plays 4 bars of time on the hi-hat and then goes to the drums for 4 bars. It just sets up the tune really nicely. He plays something like I just always loved that. And those single strokes that he played at the end there, going from the snare drum to the tom-tom, it seems to me that the two stickings that he would use the most in his solos were single strokes and right, right, left. And he might play those as 8th notes or as triplets or as 16ths, depending on the tempo. But it's funny, some of the things he would do with single strokes, it almost sounds like a rock drummer. Like he would play things like he'd be playing with Bobby Hackett and he would do stuff like that. But he seemed to really like those just powerful single strokes around the drums. There was also a thing he would play a triplet, right, left, sort of like an open 4-stroke rough around the drums that he would play, something like. You'll hear him do that a lot. Another tune that I love on these Nine Greats of Jazz recordings is Stealin Apples. It's a feature for Peanuts Hucko, and they trade 4s with Morey Feld for 2 choruses, and you'll hear him use a lot of these ideas. Another thing that he would play were these fast single-stroke triplets, and I had mentioned before that I think there's a lot of Gene Krupa in Morey Feld, even though Morey Feld really took it and made it his own. He had his own individual style. But you know, you think of fast single-stroke triplets, Gene Krupa, I mean, he would do that a lot. It was one of his signature things. But the way Gene would play it, he would throw in more accents off the beat, so that some of the accents would fall on his right hand, some of them would fall on his left. So he would do things kind of like that kind of thing. Morey Feld, the accents would be, it would fall more on the right hand sometimes. Like he might do something like so he would sort of do it that way. Another thing actually that he would do that Gene Krupa did also is on the last bar of their solos, hit an accent on beat 2 and then maybe leave the rest of the bar open. both of them would do that throughout the years. Morey Feld does it on Stealin Apples, and you'll hear Gene Krupa do it on different recordings. Oh, My Ride Is Here. Just kidding, that's a classic. But you'll hear Gene Krupa do it on different recordings, like on China Boy with the Benny Goodman Trio. Gene will do that, hit that accent on beat 2, last bar of his solo. They're coming for me. Another thing that Morey Feld would do with single strokes that I really think was one of his favorite licks, because he really played this a lot over the years. You'll hear him do this on a lot of different recordings. These single strokes with a crossover from the floor tom to the snare drum. So he plays sort of like single strokes. But that one he does a lot. You'll really hear him play that one a lot. So those are some ideas he would use with single strokes. And then with that right-left sticking, I had mentioned in the other video, he would do a lot of triplet fills with that sticking. But he would also use it in his solos, and he would use it as triplets and maybe moving back and forth between different parts of the instrument. He might play something like, and then he would also play that sticking right, left as eighth notes, usually with each hand on a different part of the instrument. So he would play, or he would play, that was another kind of thing he would do a lot. It's interesting that crossover thing with the floor tom that he played with single strokes. So with single strokes, you're sort of accenting every third eighth note, which is what that right, left sticking ends up doing. So the single strokes that he played with that crossover, he also could have played right, left. And it's just interesting, you know, because he would do that here, but here he would play. And I don't know why he made that choice. He might have just liked how the crossover looked, but it's interesting. They do, even though it's the same thing, this and this, if you write them out, they're exactly the same, but they do sound a little different because the sticking is different, but more than that, they feel very different to play. Even if you can get them so even that they pretty much sound the same, they're never going to be exact, but they feel very different to play. So that also might have influenced his choice, but that's how he did sort of those different accent patterns. There's a little bit more about the great Morey Feld, really one of my favorites. Just a great player, and just one of these guys, like I said before, who could just really, I think, sound good with anyone. He made a recording under his own name, a trio, with a little bit of a more modern group, for lack of a better way to put it. And on there, he's playing some odd time signatures. They do a thing in 5/4, and he even takes a solo. And it's just really cool to hear, because he uses all this same vocabulary, and he makes it work in that context, and he still just sounds like himself. And there are many different ways to approach drumming, obviously, but I've always been very taken with guys like Morey Feld, someone who could play with Benny Goodman and Eddie Condon, and then play with this more modern group playing odd time signatures, but just still sound like himself through all of it, still sound like the same guy. I mean, he makes, you know, slight changes, of course, but it's still Morey Feld. His sound and everything is the same. He doesn't seem to be thinking, well, with this type of thing, I'll use this size bass drum, or with this kind of music, I'll tune my drums this way. His sound is the same, and he just makes it work in all those very different contexts while still being himself. And to me, that's just an incredible thing, and pretty much all my favorite players are like that. Jake Hanna was like that. I feel like he could just make his thing work with anybody. Syd Catlett, you hear him with Louis Armstrong or with Charlie Parker. He sounds great with both. He's pretty much doing the same thing. It's not that different. Same with Dave Tuff. If you hear him with a small group, Eddie Condon or Bud Freeman band, and you hear him with Woody Herman, very different. He's kind of doing the same thing. It's just they make it work with everything. It's just a nice swinging style and sound that works. And while they were versatile, they weren't chameleons. instruments, and I've just always been attracted to that type of player. So I hope this was fun. I really do appreciate the nice feedback I've gotten. I'm glad people are enjoying these. I'm definitely going to do more. So thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything else you would like to see, and I'll be back soon. Thanks a lot.